Welcome to Trailblazing Women Veterans, a podcast series that shares the stories of women veterans and their contributions to American military history. I'm Ashley Garbolja, and I'm excited to be back, baby. The real OG Ashley of the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. And I am joined with none other than the Jeff Stouffer, my history nerd, my friend for almost over a decade now, who is the Media and Communications Division Director at the National Headquarters of Indianapolis. Say hi, Jeff.
Hey, Ashley, it's good to be with you. You know, in honor of Women's History Month this March, we've designated the middle of each week as Military Women Wednesday. That's the day that we're going to bring you remarkable stories of service, sacrifice, and strength that span our nation's history. I want you to make sure that you subscribe to our podcast and newsletter at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima so you don't miss a single episode.
All right, Jeff. So are you ready? Strap in. We're going on a trip. We're gonna travel back in time for this first one. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So we are going to start off with a great story. Today, we're going to shine a spotlight on the incredible life and legacy of Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. She was and is a Civil War contract surgeon, an abolitionist, and a women's rights activist. So Dr. Walker's story is a testament to her relentless pursuit of equality and her groundbreaking contributions to both medicine and her fight for women's rights.
Well, Ashley, just if we set the stage a little bit, you go back to the American Civil War, and women were serving. They were serving as nurses and they were serving as spies. And notably, many of them fought in combat disguised as men. Clara Barton, who was known as the Angel of the Battlefield, she provided critical medical care, while others like Harriet Tubman, who was of Underground Railroad fame, worked as spies. The war marked a turning point in organized volunteer nursing corps, and that was into the milieu into which Dr. Walker emerged and became an important and trailblazing figure.
Absolutely. So delving into her early career, we find that Dr. Walker had, and if you will, this outset of the Civil War, she's seeking a surgeon position in the U.S. Army, and shocker, despite everything she was trying, there was a lot of initial rejection due to societal norms. In a bold statement for women's rights, Dr. Walker arrived in Washington, D.C., donning a bloomer-style outfit, challenging traditional gender roles. If you can believe it, though, her determination eventually led to her becoming a doctor in Washington, D.C., but only because a surgeon allowed her to work with her without pay and essentially had a place to sleep and overall ended up earning quite a bit of respect. So in 1862, she ventured to Virginia and she began tending to wounded soldiers in field hospitals. And by 1863, her medical credentials were officially recognized.
Yeah, it was a time when it was not only rare for a woman to serve in the U.S. military, very rare, it was rare for a woman to be a doctor, and she was an MD. She was indeed a doctor and a good one. Her groundbreaking journey continued when she was appointed as a War Department surgeon, and she held the equivalent rank of lieutenant or captain and established herself as a contractor. During the Civil War, of course, medical professionals were in great need. It was the deadliest war in American history, and there were so many casualties and so many lost limbs and so little medicine available long before the era of penicillin and all of the treatments that we have now and had later. In September of 1863, she really etched her name into history as the first female U.S. Army surgeon. I mean, she was in the Army serving as a contract acting assistant surgeon, civilian, in the Army of the Cumberland. And her courage knew no bounds. She crossed Confederate lines to provide medical care to Southern civilians who had been deprived of attention during the war. And very importantly, her expertise in treating wounds spared countless soldiers from unnecessary amputations. I know that you have seen, Ashley, many photographs of Civil War veterans standing there on crutches, missing a limb from their wartime experience. When they had a
Mhm.
wound and gangrene would set in, off came the limb. But she was able to do these amputations and come away from the battlefield successfully, having saved the limb, and that earned respect from her colleagues and her patients alike.
Right. And to this day, this the American Civil War remains the deadliest war with the most heavy casualties on both sides. And I remember seeing photos in history books growing up, and it's an interesting cultural shift because that was one of the first times people had photographs of really what was going on. It wasn't just a hearsay word of mouth where, oh, my son's son and my cousins and stuff are in the war and they're reporting back. It was documented. So it was an interesting time period that really shed light on and a shift in cultural values for both Union and Confederate soldiers. So it was a very unique time.
Great point. The photographer that you're talking about is Matthew Brady. Matthew Brady was one of the great pioneers in photography, all of photography, as well as wartime photography. We had a feature in the magazine several years ago about kind of the history of combat photography, and Matthew Brady was a super important figure. And his photographs of the battlefields at Antietam and various places across the eastern seaboard of the South were actually displayed before the public. So it was kind of in a way like the Vietnam War. When the Vietnam War was brought into the living rooms of the American public, it became a different kind of phenomenon. Same too with the Civil War, when all these photographs were exhibited across the country in great big events, and it was jaw-dropping. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because that did kind of bring home the problem.
Right. And you're in a time and space where everyone is involved in the Civil War. There's only the Union and the Confederate side, and there is no in between. There have been states who were fought over on territorial lines, and everyone was involved. And the only other times, we really see these total war efforts are when we're in World War I, World War II. And those are just these trajectory of shifts of importance in total economic war. So to be a surgeon in this particular time frame as a woman who's wearing bloomers going to DC trying to make a name for herself, it's a remarkable feat and a testament to her service. And not only did she face adversity in all of those ways, but she was actually taken prisoner of war, Jeff, in one of her missions behind enemy lines. And her injuries ended up leaving her unable to perform surgeries after the war. So someone who studied so diligently to amass this accreditation uh, ended up not being able to do the thing that she loved the most after the war, result of injuries, which even today we see that in our wounded warriors. So, speculations again, we we thought she was a spy. We think she could have been a spy. I mean, all things considered, given that time realm, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but there isn't hard evidence to support those claims. But in not or excuse me, 1865, President Andrew Johnson, unable to commission her as an officer and ended up bestowing, excuse me, the Medal of Honor to her because she met the criteria for risking her life to save others and enduring captivity as a prisoner of war. So this wild twist in her story, as we kind of speed up the time clock here, in 1917 there were over 900 medals of honor, including Dr. Walker's, that were stripped away from them. And I believe that's due to changing criteria. You could probably correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but she ended up continually wearing, and there are photos. There is a photo of her in the Military Women's Memorial where she's kind of like, she looks very like, she's very stoic, and she's in a pantsuit and she has her medal on. And there's many rumors that, she would wear that every day. Any situation. It was like the equivalent to the DC Hope Diamond Gal. Like she just wore it around casually, didn't matter where, but
Yeah, and
I
she
don't
was
blame her.
arrested for it. She was relentless in her desire to express herself or to wear what she wanted, be who she wanted to be. And
Mhm.
the story, her citation in her Medal of Honor, and it's important to note she is the only woman who has received the Medal of Honor. And in the citation, it was quote, has rendered valuable service to the government, and her efforts have been earnest and untiring in a variety of ways. Okay, well, that we know that she's an untiring person. And she was assigned to duty and served as an assistant surgeon in charge of female prisoners at Louisville, Kentucky, upon the recommendation of Major General Sherman and Thomas, and faithfully served as a contract surgeon. Devoted herself with much patriotic zeal, quote, to the sick and wounded soldiers, both in the field and hospitals, to the detriment of her own health, and has also endured hardships as a prisoner of war 4 months in a Southern prison while she was acting as a contract surgeon. So she not only was taken prisoner, she was a prisoner for 4 months, a POW, and continued to serve and to take care of people on both sides of the line during that time. So relentless and untiring are understatements when it comes to her.
I could not agree more. And it's it's remarkable to me, and I'm so happy that you read some of the credentials and more in depth of what happened, because we do get a lot of these superficial, like, oh yeah, she's got Medal of Honor, but most people don't know why she got the Medal of Honor. We just know she's the only woman who had it. And again, there's these really quirky things about her in this time period, really shaking up and breaking some ceilings that would be referred to in generations to come of military engagement with other countries and entering World War I, et cetera. Because women continued to volunteer in all capacities, and we'll talk a little bit more about the other, even American Revolutionary War and whatnot. But I'll leave that there. But she, Dr. Mary Walker wore that medal until she passed away in 1919 following World War One. So what
She
an
did,
interesting
she
time to be alive.
she didn't care that it was stripped, and for whatever reason, it was probably it probably had to do with a variety of criteria reasons, and it probably had something to do with the fact that she was a woman. But at the end of the day, her actions in the Civil War would have qualified for a Medal of Honor by today's criteria. She literally, she was taken prisoner, she served under combat, she saved lives, and there were many, many witnesses to it. So I think that she is someone who really exemplifies trailblazer when we talk about trailblazing. She continued long after her pioneering medical career. She continued to challenge societal norms for her time, and she resisted. I'll start that over. Beyond her pioneering medical career, Dr. Walker challenged societal norms for her time, resisting gender-based clothing expectations. She was arrested multiple times for dressing in men's clothes, but she proudly proclaimed, "I don't wear men's clothes. I wear my own clothes." She was brought up in an abolitionist family and was led by her father, who was a country doctor, and they had a small farm. But they instilled values of equality and support for each other, and really importantly, for the Underground Railroad. She was also a farm girl who grew up and did not wear dresses to do her chores in. Dr. Walker's advocacy for women's rights persisted long after the Civil War. She fought for the right, really, and this is an important feature, to wear non-traditional clothing and championed pay equality for women far ahead of her time. This was at a time when a woman could get arrested for wearing clothes that normally would be found on a man.
I just want to say I'm so thankful that I have an option and I can wear pants whenever I choose. I'm wearing pants right now and I love it. I think about the idea of her in a dress with pants underneath just to show that, like, the oxymoron of what the request was, particularly if you grew up in rural America at that time. It's so impractical to think, oh, you're doing chores. You grow up with a certain mindset, but like that really doesn't matter. It's about your character and your values and who you are as a person. And
In
it's
the
just,
show,
it's so quiet. It's so crazy.
In the show notes, there's links to some of the stories that were done by the Congressional Medal of Honor Society and the National Park Service, who then there were photos of her and how she dressed. And it's really interesting. And a lot of times because, a nurse or a person who was in the field in the Civil War would normally have to wear a dress, women's clothing, but she would do that, but she had pants on underneath. So she was, and there are images of that, and her bloomers. That was her famous calling card, was she wore these bloomer pants, and they were literally just pants underneath a dress, or it looked like to me when we look at them. So
Yeah, it's wild to think that she was just subject to ridicule throughout her life for choices, despite being such what was the word choices that from the citation, it was patriotic zeal, right? The fact that it was more important that you were fitting into the status quo than it was all of the amazing things you could do as a human being and contribute to such a monumental time in history, which most people don't realize they're in history when they're standing presently in it. But she's a part of that amazing journey, and she is to be celebrated for this indomitable spirit. Dr. Mary Edwards Walker is a trailblazer heroine who's shattered glass ceilings and paved the way for countless women.
yeah, Dr. Walker's story is truly amazing. I don't think any of those Civil War soldiers would care one bit about what she was wearing as long as they were saving their leg from amputation. And I mean, as well as I do, that the infections and the things, she was not just a field doctor, she was a very good one and very well known. And when we have to honor that, in the history not only of the military but in the history of women in medicine. you know um but Dr. Walker's story is one, but women were finding ways to be a part of the American military service scene since the revolution, since our nation was founded. And we really should take a moment to salute some of those inspiring women from the years before.
Absolutely. If we go back in history, we'll take another lap back. And the American Revolutionary War, our independence from British rule, it led to the formation of what we know now, United States of America, baby. And an amazing it's an amazing thing to think that so many people were willing to, you know, stand and shoulder side by side due to shared values. And during the American Revolutionary War, women were serving as nurses, they were following camps, they were spies, they were contributing to the fight of independence in various ways. So many may be familiar with the story of Deborah Sampson, who disguised herself as a man to serve in the Continental Army. She's the epitome of determination. That's an understatement, but we know there's far more to that story than we'll ever be able to peel back in a history book. But despite, again, social norms, these are women who played vital roles in supporting the troops and gathering intelligence. So here's just a few of those women that we were able to dig up from our history books.
Yeah, Deborah Sampson's a great example. She did disguise herself as a man, and she went by the alias of Robert Shirtliff. And she served as a soldier in the Continental Army for 17 months, and people thought she was a man. But her dedication and bravery made her a celebrated figure in American military history. Her name was actually recently came up in Washington with the passage of the Deborah Sampson Act in 2021, and that requires VA to take steps to end harassment and sexual assault, including gender-based harassment. So her legend lives on.
Another unique person, Molly Pitcher, otherwise known as Mary Ludwig Hayes. Molly Pitcher was a legendary figure whom is known for her actions on the battlefield. While there's a specific identity, there's some subject to debate here, but Molly Pitcher is often associated with women who were carrying water to soldiers or helping with cannon fire during the Battle of Monmouth in 1778. Her actions are this symbolic of vital support, and women being in these combat support roles far before we were willing to put a name to it or acknowledge it. She is somebody who provided critical support during that war.
Well, the Revolutionary War was truly a family affair. The the men, women, children, entire families. And that was one of our big advantages in the Revolutionary War, was it was non-conventional. Our non-conventional warfare was what really probably put us over the top against the British, which was infinitely more organized. It was a huge war machine. But we had the patriots who were fighting for their freedom, and they didn't see it just as one man going off to war and leaving the family behind, but a whole family fighting and supporting, and that included, of course, the females of the family. Lydia Darragh was a Quaker woman who became a spy for the American forces. A lot of people don't know her name, but she was overhearing British military plans during her work as a housekeeper for one of the British officers, and she would relay that information over to the American side, and thus, would foil their plans.
That's fascinating. There's another individual. Her name's Lucy Knox. She was the wife of Major General Henry Knox and one of George Washington's most trusted officers.
Right?
She would accompany her husband during the war, which was like unheard of. This is just a random, like I random thought here, but unheard of, accompanying her husband, a general, major general, out to the battlefields and help significantly maintain morale and support among soldiers and their families. So if you think about a family affair, there were women who were making these trips out
Yeah.
to support their husbands and their sons and even their daughters, right? They were not only just in that time and space homemakers, but they were running the homesteads while all of the male family members were out fighting. So it's a unique time where women were the heads of their households in the absence of a male figure, or again, depending on lineage and who you had in your family was how that fell. But it became more commonplace, and there was a lot of very smaller things that started to happen for women as property owners as a result of loss of family member during the next few decades to come. So just a random ad hoc thought there. But something unique too, we don't talk about the Mexican American War very often. Jeff, it doesn't really come up. I just remember in history books it'd be this like little blurb.
Right.
We don't talk about it, but the Mexican American War was conflict between the United States and Mexico, and it was over territorial disputes between within the Southwest. So
Right.
um, disputes along the Rio Grande. There was, which ended up signing in the Treaty of Guadalupe. I think it's
Hidalgo,
Hidalgo,
Guadalupe Hidalgo, right?
Guadalupe Hidalgo. So that was in 1848. This treaty ended up adding vast territories in the United States, including California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, Oklahoma. And this expansion reshaped the terrain and eco diversity of the United States. Such a unique time frame, but again, we had women working as nurses, laundresses, tending to wounds of soldiers, maintaining camps during the Mexican American War. While again, we weren't, as women were not officially enlisted in the military during this period, there were plenty of support roles to go around, and their contributions are noteworthy as well.
Yeah, Sarah Borginis is one of the notable women associated with the Mexican American War. She was, as many were, a laundress and was one of the first women to receive a military pension for her service during the war. This would be a battle that women would fight for, and the American Legion would later fight for in time to come. The concept that women deserve the same level of benefits, disability benefits, pensions, recognition after their service as did their male counterparts.
Absolutely. There was a large uptick in nursing, particularly with women, from Catherine R. Berry. She was a woman who served as a nurse in the war, and alongside other dedicated nurses, played a critical role in tending to injured soldiers. You've got folks like Sarah Edmonds, who was famously associated with this particular, well, excuse me, I digress. She was famously associated with the Civil War, and she ended up serving in the Mexican American War as a male soldier under the alias of Franklin Thompson. Her story of disguise and service is fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but not have heard about it, right? Again, it's just, I think there were just, I'm just going to say this out loud. I'm pretty sure there were more women pretending to be men than we will ever know. I think it was really easy to just pull your hair back when everyone was rocking a ponytail. That's all I'm saying.
We only know the ones we only know the ones whose stories we know. You're right, and the ones who kept their secrets forever will never know. And it's amazing when you hear about these women who did dress as men in combat operations, how they were able to pull that off is pretty darn amazing. And number one, how they were able to pull off that difficult, complex thing, but also, you know, what how difficult it was, but then why did they do that? I mean, you're basically saying to yourself, I'm not only going to fight for my country or fight in this battle, I'm going to jeopardize my whole identity and everything and every societal norm in order to do so. So they took great risks and took a lot of courage to do what they did. We've mentioned Harriet Tubman and Clara Barton, who are both storied historical figures who served during the Civil War, like Dr. Walker, but there are others whose stories are less well known.
Right. So as we move into the Civil War, kind of again recapping on Dr. Mary Walker, there are other women who were standouts, and one of those is Mary Ann Mother Bickerdyke. Mary Ann Bickerdyke was a nurse and an aid worker during the Civil War. She became well known for her tireless nursing efforts, caring for wounded soldiers on the front lines and in hospitals. Her contributions, much like, Dr. Mary Walker, greatly improved the care of Union soldiers.
Dorothea Dix served as the superintendent for Army nurses for the Union Army during the Civil War. She played a crucial role in organizing and overseeing the nursing corps, ensuring proper care for wounded soldiers. And really, she was the one who laid the foundation for what would become the Army Nurse Corps that would, go on into the latter 19th and 20th centuries.
Yep. And it's just here's another spectacular nurse and teacher by the name of Susie King Taylor. She was an African American woman, both nurse and teacher, for the 33rd United States Colored Troops during the Civil War. She ended up writing a memoir detailing her experiences, providing valuable insights to the lives of African American soldiers and their caregivers during war. How remarkable is that?
It really is. As for Dr. Walker's extraordinary journey to become the first and only woman to receive the Medal of Honor, we have links to our show notes and where you can watch a video from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society and explore the National Park Service and U.S. Army profiles about her. I hope you take a look at those.
Yes, absolutely. Highly encourage everyone to check it out. As we wrap up this episode, we hope that we've inspired you by the incredible life of Dr. Mary Edwards Walker and all of these extraordinary women throughout the American Revolution, the Mexican-American War, and the Civil War. There are a lot of stories that go untold, and we can only share with you the ones that we know. We can only assume that there were far more women stepping up to the plate in all of these capacities as an all-volunteer force from day one. So thank you for joining us today. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast to honor the trailblazers who have shaped history, or her story, depending on who you ask. And if you have a story to share, post it on your favorite social media platform, tag the American Legion, and use the hashtag Military Women Wednesday. We'll see you next week for more stories of outstanding women as we continue to celebrate Women's History Month.